This is easily the most fun build I've played so far in PoE, obliterating juiced maps and one taps tier, 4 pinnacle bosses with ease, and all that on a budget. Johnny Boy hates it, but I love it. So without further ado, let's talk about how the build works. So you can start copy-pasting and have some fun for once in this game before GGG nukes the build to smithereens. First things first, what the hell is that white goo flying everywhere and all over the monitor? That, my friends, is not prostate milk. No, it is not, because that is Glacial Lance. An absolutely incredible skill, because when mapping, all you need to do is hold down this button and everything dies. The perfect skill for my lovely one brain cell dad gamers out there. But this only works if you do one thing, and that is keep frenzy charges up permanently. And why do you want frenzy charges for this skill? Well, shit. Having frenzy charges makes your glacial lances explode, and while exploding, it also deals a buttload of additional AoE damage, and in turn making the build an excellent map clearer. Now, keeping those frenzy charges up is doable on both the Huntress and the Ranger, but running this build on a Ranger is superior in that regard, which is due to the ascendancy nodes, namely having Avidity being able to instantly grant you 7 frenzy charges. But rolling a Ranger has one additional benefit, and that is that Ranger has double the one-shotting capabilities of a Huntress, which is due to Thrilling Case. Because to one-shot bosses, we are rocking Wind Serpent's Fury, which deals insane amounts of damage, scaling higher the more frenzy charges you have. But before you cry yourself to sleep, knowing you've made the wrong choice to level a Huntress, it's absolutely fine to play that as well. You'll just do slightly less single target damage and have slightly less clear. Alright, and what about generating frenzy charges? How is that solved? Well, shit, it's easy. We have Combat Frenzy granting us charges every 4 seconds when we freeze enemies, which we do constantly, and we also have Sniper's Mark. As long as we crit the enemies we mark with this skill, we'll grant ourselves frenzy charges, which again has a high chance of granting us 7 charges rather than just 1 at a time. And critting enemies has never been easier, because by rocking a spear, we can in turn rock the new Tangletongue Spear, which grants a shit ton of crit chance. And when it comes to the other skills on our bars, it's extremely simple. Because other than the persistent buffs, all we really need to press is Infernal Cry, which grants us a humongous damage bonus when we're doing the Wombo Combo. To boost this so-called Wombo Combo even further though, I'll provide you with some tips in the end, such as using Bone Storm before pushing the Wind Serpent button, which also massively boosts our one-tapping capabilities. But these tips are optional, since most ARPG enjoyers are dumb as donkeys and can't keep track of more than one button, just throwing it in there as an option if you want to experiment a little. Now let's head on over to the gem section, and we'll check out what gems we want to be using to make this build as strong as possible. And starting us right off, we have Purity of Fire. This is a unique item that is absolutely not mandatory, but utilizing this allows you to socket persistent gem buffs without spending any spirit. What is important, however, is that you grab a scepter in your offhand, as we need that massive spirit bonus to utilize all of our lovely persistent gems. And having Sacred Flame is lovely if you can afford it, as it also grants you a buttload of fire damage. Fire damage that you can turn into cold damage if you want more freezing. Not needed, but helpful. We then have our Spear Stab. We'll use this on bosses to stack up our frenzy charges and break their armor, allowing us to deal more physical damage. Other than that, you can simply socket anything you find useful here. Now to the good stuff. Our Glacial Lances has a spear and an explosion component. The explosion triggers if you have frenzy charges and triples your damage. The support gems are then sorted in terms of how important they are, in case you only have a 4 or 5 link. This goes for all the skills. So first, we have Perpetual Charge to save frenzy charges, Martial Tempo for Big Dam, and Primal Armament for a shit ton of damage. Long shot, as we're mainly using this skill on long range. And finally embitter to more easily freeze enemies. When it comes to wind serpent, we have this gem, ambrosia. This is so fucking disgusting you wouldn't believe. You want to grab this and then find a mana flask with increased charges, as many as you can find. The footage recorded was with 70 charges, but now I'm rocking 113, and holy shit, did my damage skyrocket. We then go for close combat and concentrated effect for more damage, along with blindside to make sure we hit 100% crit and overextend for additional damage. The blind for blindside we get from basic attacks on bosses. Next, it's time for combat frenzy. This grants us a lot of our charges when mapping, and protrusion boosts it further. This is also the reason I wanted as much cold damage as possible on my glacial lance, to make sure I instantly freeze enemies for combat frenzy. And then we have the reason we want a scepter, cast on critical. We use this to bust our sniper's mark, which in turn is how we gain our final frenzy charges. This persistent buff, however, costs a whopping 100 spirit, meaning it basically requires a scepter if we want to use any other persistent buffs. If you have 100% crit chance or close to it, then you'll also trigger cast on crit pretty much every cast if you use impetus and energy retention, so you'll definitely want to combine it with inspiration to save some mana. We then have Wind Dancer, of course, as we're an evasion-based build and completely optional, the Rowway mount. I'm not a massive fan of this, but I can't deny its effectiveness as long as you have some stun threshold on your passive tree. When it comes to Infernal Cry, we only use this on bosses. It grants you a buttload of fire damage when used, and you'll want to grab a low-level one here. And why is that? Well, shit, because it requires strength. And I'm stacking dex and intelligence mainly because I'm using Hand of Wisdom and Action along with getting attack speed from dex in the passive tree. The other reason being, the only buff you get from a higher level is increased Warcry speed, but you do you, my man or woman. We then boost it via Premedition along with Raging Cry and Enraged Warcry to both gain and use Rage. We also have Rage Generation via our basic skill for this, greatly boosting our damage. And finally, Second Wind, in case we fuck up and need to do the wombo combo again. Ghost Dance, if you're using Energy Shield, which I am to some degree, and finish it all off with Herald of Ice for some additional clear. Here we simply go for damage and getting Innovate, which we should be able to keep up permanently when mapping. But only if you do one thing right. Which brings me on to the next topic, gearing. You want as much lightning damage as possible. Because shock is broken in this game, granting us 20% damage and permanent Innovate uptime. And I'm solving a lot of that via Hand of Wisdom and Action. We need Dex and Int for our gems, so it becomes natural to stack them for this item. But no worries if you can't get them, because equally as good as getting a good ass, rare gloves with a fuck ton of flat damage on them. And we indeed want a lot of flat damage, because the weapon making this build so great doesn't have any, and that is Tangle Tongue. Not only does this thing have the most insane base crit chance of all time, but it also forks critical hits. And what the fuck does that mean? Well, no one knows. Unless we hover over it, of course. First, it allows your crit chance to basically double by rolling twice. Unless you have 100% crit chance, because then the crit damage rolls twice instead, doubling your damage. This weapon is bonkers for rangers that don't have a lot of crit via their ascendancy and is an absolute must-have if you want to roll a crit-based ranger build. Alright, and when it comes to the other items, you definitely want a Beacon of Azes to start off with. You'll have 100% crit pretty much, and then you'll also have 100% elemental penetration using this, saving you like 30 passive tree nodes. For the offhand, a scepter is needed for the spirit, and preferably Sacred Flame. And the rings? A buttload of flat cold and lightning damage. Physical and fire is also alright, but I'd focus on cold and lightning first. You then simply sort out your resistances, get as much max life as possible, and you'll have the best rings possible. When it comes to the other items, there are but a few important factors to consider. First, get those resistances sorted for the love of God. Then, stack max life and evasion. It's important that you get as much evasion as possible on your chest, and then energy shield on your helmet, as you'll get additional bonuses from the passive tree doing this. I'm also mentioning, if you have a good ingenuity, then use it. The flat damage bonuses will thank you. And that, my friends, is the gear. To summarize, flat damage bonuses and defensives are your best friends, where you'll use that big brain of yours to get max life, resistances, and fix your stat checks for dexterity and intelligence. Lovely. Now it's time to get smart and open up that huge passive tree of ours and get done with this goddamn guide. In the planner, I'll have 2 passive trees, one big dick version which goes full damage to nuke pinnacle bosses and one-shot everything, and one defensive option. Only go for big dick option if you've got at least 6 inches of man meat, as the chances of dying are rather large if you let enemies hit you. In any way, here's the defensive one. First, we have the Ascendancy. Avidity in combination with thrilling chase is what makes the build so goddamn strong, allowing us to gain a bunch of additional frenzy charges, and having Wind Serpent deal double its damage via more frenzy charges. We then have Tailwind, of course, which is how we stay alive when going full throttle damage version, or making us immortal if we go for this defensive version, rocking 80% evasion or so and an additional 30% damage reduction here. Next we head on over to grab frenzy charges, some damage, and our first jewel. Here I want you to focus on getting as much crit chance as possible, and emeralds. The rest of the priority will be in the planner, as there are a bunch of good options here. Next we go for some damage, more damage, and additional frenzy charges. The defensive cluster here is why we want a buttload of evasion on our chest, which in combination with Spectral Ward also turns the evasion into energy shield. Lovely. Continuing onwards, we find some attack speed and frenzy charges, allowing us to get the 7 we talked about earlier. And also Subterfuge Mask, which is why we wanted energy shield on our helmet, turning it into evasion. Moving upwards, we find some defensives and a large crit cluster. Now for 2 important factors that you need to know. First, you must get a sapphire if you copy-paste the passive tree, or else you won't have any mana. This is because you want mana on kill. Another option is to grab Siphon down here, but then you're wasting 2 passive nodes. And for the final factor, what to anoint? Well, damn. We have Wild Storm here, which you could anoint to save up some passives, but that one is expensive as shit. A cheaper option is any of the crit chance nodes you can afford, or True Power if you stack int. Or a defensive option that I'm using, Self-Mortification, which grants me 40 or so % stun threshold. Great for when you're riding around on your bird. Well, shit. Passive tree complete. Let's get heckin' good now, my friends, as it's time for me to teach you how to play the build. And when we're done with that, you're free to fuck off. So, playing the build. First, we have mapping. This is easy as hell. All you do is spam your Glacial Lance skill and you'll delete the screen. If you're going full damage, then you may want to stay far away from your enemies. No worries though. The range of your Glacial Lancer is 2 screens away. When it comes to bossing, this is when we need to start rubbing our strong minds together and come up with a wombo combo that will delete the boss in one go. If you feel like try-harding, then it is possible to weave in a bonus storm to get that juicy one shot in. But the next step relies on RNG, so your bonus storm stacks may fall off if you do it too early. It's also possible to add in an Orb of Storms with Font of Rage along with Voltaic Mark. These 3 bonuses should nearly double your damage if you do it correctly. But that's too much for me, man. Instead, for the dummies, such as myself, focus on doing this. Get your frenzy charges to 7 by stabbing the boss in the gut with your spear stab. Once the frenzy charges are 7, you simply press the infernal cry button. Now, all you have left to do is use Wind Serpent and hope you kill the boss. If you have a non-perfect gear setup, then you may succeed in one-shotting every now and then, and may need 2 setups for the T4 bosses. If you are maxed out on crit, then you should one-shot the guy every time. But either way, enjoy your loot, drop a sub, and I'll see you in the next one.